I'm Anthony Leeds, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this conversation, which will be with Professor Roy Taylor from the University of Newcastle, who has contributed to a very great extent to the area which we've discussed over the last few weeks. Viewers will recall that we've been listening to Professor Sharad Tahiri from the University of Leicester, describing the work on achieving diabetes remission in populations in the Middle East and North Africa, and then subsequently talking about fatty liver, and also in relation to the potential for energy-restricted diets to be used for helping people with sleep problems in relation to diabetes. And this week, we have the pleasure of listening to Professor Roy Taylor. Roy, thank you for joining us. And there's a particularly important reason as to why we're having this conversation today, because you've just published the second edition of your book, Life Without Diabetes. I haven't got a copy of the latest edition, but here is the previous one, which I have in front of me. And I know that it's been enormously, thank you, I know it's been enormously popular and has done very well. And an important thing that I think viewers should know, of course, is that you also decided to contribute all of the royalties from it to Diabetes UK, and that this has made an enormous contribution to their research funding. So I think that was a great thing to do. So thank you very much. But the most important thing is I do know that lots of people have used the book and have benefited enormously from it. So it's made a huge contribution to something that both of us and many other colleagues are very keen on, which is that diabetes remission should be available for people to apply as is appropriate. So my next question to you is, your team has also done an enormous amount of work in relation to understanding the underlying mechanisms as to why this happened. So could you very briefly tell us, what did you find? What did your team find?
Thank you, Tony. Yes, this has really been a very exciting chase, because in association with my work of looking after people with diabetes, I've been chasing for some years the matter of what happens to food after we eat it. And by applying innovative techniques of magnetic resonance imaging to be able to measure where the food goes inside the internal organs of the body, it was possible to build up a picture. But then suddenly the penny dropped, and the cause of type 2 diabetes was staring me in the face. In other words, people with type 2 diabetes were likely to have too much fat inside their liver, causing liver insulin resistance, and too much fat inside the pancreas, suppressing the ability of cells to make insulin. So we tested these ideas, tested this hypothesis, which I call the twin cycle hypothesis, and we were able to show, in fact, yes, type 2 diabetes did appear to be due to this twin cycle, a vicious cycle in liver and a vicious cycle in pancreas. And by reducing the total amount of fat in the body by weight loss, we could show that, in fact, all the changes went back to normal. And so where does metabolic health come from? It comes from the health of the metabolic organs. So restoring the liver and pancreas to youthful function, we're able to demonstrate a potential major way of allowing people to return to health from this previous life sentence of type 2 diabetes.
Mm-hmm. And you did, in fact, of course, show some really exciting finds in terms of the changes in the pancreas with a normalization of its structure, which I saw those images, and I thought those were extraordinarily exciting when you first showed them.
Yes, this was just an incidental observation along the way, that we found that the pancreas in type 2 diabetes is relatively shrunken compared with normal. And we did a study to see if it would expand on putting things back to normal. And it didn't in the short term, but then with a longer term study, we were able to show, yes, it gradually returns to normal size and shape over 2 years, which is just astounding. So your pancreas isn't dead necessarily, it can recover, not just in function, but actually in structure as well.
Yeah, and that, of course, does imply that you'd have to achieve the changes, the weight loss and the sustained weight loss and the sustained dietary energy intake reduction, which, of course, is quite a challenge for people, isn't it? Particularly if you're using a conventional diet. But in your book, you've described ways in which people can do it, but then also in collaboration on a Diabetes UK funded study, you used a formula diet program to achieve the initial weight loss, then moving after 8 or 12 or maybe 16 weeks back towards a normal food diet. So that is a challenging thing to do. So how do your people actually achieve it?
Well, the origins of this come from the problem I was posed in testing our hypothesis. I needed a reliable way of getting individuals to drop their weight by what I calculated to be about 15 kilograms in order to see whether this was right. So it was because of that I devised the use of the low-calorie supplements, because I knew from old studies that on a low-calorie diet, hunger is less of a problem. And I also knew from listening to my patients over a very long period of time about some of the very serious and genuine problems people have in losing weight. And one of the prominent ones is the day-to-day decision-making, deciding what to eat, how much to eat, and it's a cumulative burden that gets to people. So by resolving this matter of what to eat, etc., by using one packet for a meal, we were able to deal with the two major problems. And much to my astonishment, in this first critical study, the counterpoint study, we were able to show that people actually quite enjoyed the diet once we were established on it, and the difficulty shifted to getting back onto normal food. That was the difficult bit that people flagged up. And that's the origin of what we now see as step 2 of this process, a stepped return to normal eating, very carefully controlled in order to get people into eating, but at a lower level of calorie intake than they habitually took before.
So having demonstrated that that's possible, of course, that now is being rolled out by NHS England and also NHS Scotland, which is wonderful. The first published paper showed some really good results. I'm still waiting for the second paper, and I've been chasing people with regard to it, but I don't know whether you know how long we're going to have to wait for this subsequent second paper, but the results look pretty good, don't they, so far?
They do. It takes a while to process all this data. And I had a meeting with NHS England just this morning, and it's moving along. Things are going very well. The uptake of the programme is particularly gratifying in that essentially all the funded places are taken up. And so this is a major success to have taken research from the hypothesis through to test it in a study in general practice, the DiRECT study that you mentioned, and on to actually make it a national programme.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, and I've discussed this point with quite a number of colleagues, how long do you think it took from the development of the original idea to its now position of being rolled out into practice? Was that 15 years, 17 years, 20 years? Many people say it takes about 20 years to get through from a hypothesis and a first experiment through to application. What do you think the timing was with this?
It's 19 years since I nearly fell off my chair in my office when I realised the possibility. It took another 2 years to put the hypothesis together with scientific backing and to get it published in Diabetologia, and that was in 2008. Diabetes UK then had the foresight to grant me a relatively small research grant to test this idea, which was a counterpoint study. That is the most important study of the whole sequence because it put the idea on the map and it spawned a whole host of studies of low-calorie diet and indeed led to where we are just now. So 2006, here we are in 2025. It's been an exciting 19 years. Yes.
Now, the other question is, does this just apply to people who are overweight and who have obesity? Or, because I'm aware that you've actually looked at other people, haven't you, who might be not quite so... Yeah.
One of the striking observations we made in the DiRECT study were in the local people. As part of that, we were able to study them using magnetic resonance as well. When we look inside the bodies and find out what happened, the changes inside the organs were exactly the same in a person going from a body mass index of 45 down to 42, compared with a body mass index of 27 down to 24. They were the two extremes of body mass index range that we studied. But if that's the same, surely it should be the same all the way down. Now, for a long time, experts have been saying, oh, type 2 diabetes who aren't obese, that's due to some other condition. It's a different cause. Well, that struck me as probably untrue. And so we did the Retune study, which is a study of people of body mass index from 21 up to 27. Entirely unremarkable looking people who you wouldn't think were carrying excess weight. But in fact, when we got them to lose only 10% of their body weight, everything went back to normal with identical changes inside liver and pancreas, as we saw. The glucose dropped, metabolism returned to normal. So very exciting, and it leads to a simple bottom line. These bottom lines are so important. If a person has type 2 diabetes, they are too heavy for their own body. We are very different individuals. Just look at people in the street. We come in all sorts of sizes and shapes. And it's not surprising, perhaps, that people start from different points. They have a different type of body build. And so knowing that common type 2 diabetes is solely caused by acquiring a bit too much weight than a person can individually handle, that's profoundly important. So this we call the personal fat threshold concept. And so it's not possible to measure to find out what it is in advance, but sure as anything, we can determine it when people lose weight and they go back to normal.
Now, once this has been achieved, of course, maintaining weight in the long term is a challenge, and exercise plays a part in helping people to maintain weight. And yet, actually, in a number of studies, and for example, the ones that I've been associated with in Copenhagen, where we've been dealing with older people with knee problems, we find that while they will adhere to the dietary component very well, they're not very keen on doing their exercises, either muscle strengthening exercises or the amount of walking about they do. And I understand from talking to a number of people that actually getting people to really make a real change in their total exercise is quite a challenge. Do you have a way of addressing this? What recommendations do you have for addressing this?
That's a very good question, and there are two parts to my answer. The first is that in embarking upon the rapid weight loss, we always ask people not to start a new exercise program. Please do not do it. It will cause compensatory eating. And this is a common observation. It's so often you hear someone say they joined a gym for 3 months and their weight's gone up. What's happening? They don't understand it. Much of this compensatory eating is subconscious. It just happens. And so please don't try and exercise and diet to lose weight at the same time. Diet is hugely more important. And so diet alone, do not exercise. And parenthetically, let me tell you, Tony, when I explain this to people, and we've talked about going on a low-calorie diet, not eating anything else, no alcohol, it'll be tough, but worthwhile. And then I say, but I don't want you to start a new exercise program. Guess what happens? A slow smile spreads across their face. Typically, people with type 2 diabetes do not particularly enjoy exercise. And that's just a fact. There may be some good physiological reasons behind it, but it's just one of these facts. So please, no additional exercise in achieving the weight loss. But as I mentioned, this is a two-part matter. 1, get the weight down. 2, keep it down. That's when slowly building up day-to-day physical activity would be a very good thing. Now, we run into a bit of a problem here because, as I mentioned, many people with type 2 diabetes don't particularly like exercise. And in the DiRECT study, we particularly advise them to increase their walking distance. So park further away from their work, always use the steps, the stairs, not the lift. And people said, yes, we're doing that. But in fact, when we used our accelerometer studies, measuring precisely what people were doing, we were able to observe that, in fact, they did not change at all. Now, this is really important because it's the same after bariatric surgery. So surgeons get very excited when they're that patients tell them, yes, they're exercising much more. But a very small study we did of this showed that, in fact, there was no change when we actually have a spy in the cab, if you like, and we can actually measure what's going on. So exercise, weight loss, ideally, it's there. And let me just add that I'm by no means against exercise. People who exercise more will tend not to put on the weight in the first place, and that is so valuable. So exercise is a good thing, but understanding the relationship, the human relationship that we can understand between cutting down on food and what people do day to day, that's key to being sympathetic and helping people achieve the best possible outcome with all these factors.
Yeah, and you mentioned the accelerometer, and with those, of course, you can also measure the amount of complete inactivity and all the sort of increased activity associated with daily living and so on. And if you could encourage some small changes in the way that people actually do what they normally do during the day, that can be helpful.
It can indeed, and it is still what I would advise, although I am mindful of our data showing that on average there was no change. Now, averages are very deceptive. Don't believe very large studies. You need the individual in front of you to consider the best possible approach. And the best possible approach is certainly to get out and walk more, just to be more physically active.
Now, I also know that you're interested in the possibility that other countries will take an interest in this, and can you tell us whether there's been any major uptake in any of the other countries where it varies, the amount of diabetes and overweight and obesity in different countries does vary. What's the position globally in terms of other countries taking up these ideas?
Yes, in other countries there's been local take-up. Notably, several places in India roll this out and are acquiring very large series, and hopefully we'll see published at some stage. Canada is just setting in place a program in at least one province, and other countries patchily so. Obviously, I mentioned the national program in England. In Scotland, every district health authority rolls out this under their own control. So yes, it is spreading, but it's spreading mighty slowly. Now, why is that? Well, some experts don't like hearing that type 2 diabetes, which is such a difficult subject from their point of view, focusing on details, that this condition can be got rid of just by eating less. It is really anathema to them. And especially in the United States, where the pressure to publish, the pressure to achieve new findings is so great, it's a message that's really rather unwelcome. But in some places we're making headway. I know some centres in the States do use it, but mighty few. So it's a long battle. But here we have something crashingly simple. It's inevitable that the message will get across sooner or later, even though it's most potently spread by people with diabetes rather than doctors, I'm sorry to say.
Yes. No, I know you probably can't answer this question. I'm going to ask it anyway. Having sort of spoken to a few people who are also involved, one of the key questions from the NHS point of view is whether this intervention actually is cost effective from a health economic and analytical point of view. I understand, though I've not seen any figures or any detail at all, that everybody's rather pleased with the outcome of at least the preliminary information. Are we looking at an economically acceptable intervention? Because that's going to be one of the key things, isn't it?
Yes, it's desperately important we get health economic experts involved to analyse this. But let me tell you some of the headline figures that will contribute to this. The best long-term data we have is from the 5-year follow-up of the DiRECT study. And that showed if you were allocated to the weight loss group, whether or not you achieved weight loss, whether or not you achieved remission, taking the whole group together, if you allocated that group, you had half the chance of being admitted to hospital with serious illness than if you were in the best treatment by current guidelines group. So halving that. Now, hospital admissions are expensive. That speaks for itself. But quite apart from that, the cardiovascular risk indices that we can calculate go way down. Now, we have data from the Retune study, the Look-Ahead study in the United States, which was started a long time ago. It was just a general weight loss study, but it's been followed up for a long time, and they were able to look back at their data using our modern definition of remission, and they found that if people were in remission for 4 years, the risk of heart disease went down by 1/2. That is a huge reduction. And just to put it into context, if you take a statin tablet, your risk of heart disease goes down by about 1/4. So this is something which is twice as important. And moreover, if we flip back to the DiRECT study, cancer, the best kept secret in healthcare is the fact that rates of the common cancers increase according to body mass index. So what do we find in DiRECT? Again, by just being allocated to the weight loss group, there was a big difference. Now, the numbers are small, they're not statistically significant, but let me just tell you the numbers, which are very impressive. In the control group, best guidelines according to NICE, there were 8 cancers, and all of those were known to be related to weight. Now, that's exactly the rate we would expect from this group of people with type 2 diabetes who do have an increased risk of cancer. But in the weight loss group, how many cancers were there? 1. That is a staggering difference. And it's borne out by data after bariatric surgery. That's the same direction. That's impressive data. But then after bariatric surgery, we're seeing people going from very, very high body mass index down to high body mass index. So perhaps it's not surprising that the effect on cancer is not quite so great. But in terms of health economics, wow, as a taxpayer, I want to see this rolled out. But of course, like you, I want to see the hard data that will support it.
Yeah, good. Well, that sounds very promising. So we look forward to seeing those figures when they're published, hopefully in the very near future. Just as a reminder to viewers, underneath the window on the screen, you'll find web links to various sources which relate to the conversation that we've had today. And then also underneath that, I've put the links to the various diabetes risk online analyzers that you can look at in the different countries around the world. So those are there underneath this one. So, Roy, we could talk more for much longer because there's a lot more to talk about. But for the moment, thank you very much indeed for talking to us today.
It's been a great pleasure, Tony. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.